The point of order has been withdrawn. The following amendment, the clerk read the amendment.
Amendment by Kemple.
The chair recognizes Mr. Kemple to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment makes a number of perfecting changes. First, we ensure that promoting the differential treatment and providing special benefits to individuals on the basis of their race, sex, color, or ethnicity is captured in the definition of a DEI office. For further oversight, any policies, procedures, or trainings designed or implemented in reference to race, color, sex, or ethnicity must also be approved by the Higher Ed Coordinating Board. Additionally, the state auditor will conduct a compliance review of each institution of higher education once every 4 years. If the state auditor finds that an institution of higher education is not in compliance with this act, the institution of higher education will have 180 days to cure the violation. If the institution of higher education fails to cure the violation, they will be ineligible for funding increases in exceptional items in the following biennium. This amendment amends subsection C of the bill, replacing the existing language with the provision that affirmed the ability of an institution of higher education or their employees to submit a statement to a grant provider or accrediting agency that highlights the institution's work supporting first-generation college students, low-income students, or underserved student populations. Lastly, the amendment allows a student or employee of the institution that is required to participate in DEI, participate in DEI training to bring action against the institution for injunctive or declaratory relief. I'll move passage.
Mr. Speaker,
Ms. Collier, for what purpose?
will the gentleman yield for questions?
Gentleman yield for questions.
Yes.
Gentleman yields.
Chair Kemple, thank you. Just wanted to go over the part where you said you're removing on page 4, lines 1 through 12, correct? That deals with the governing board of institution of higher education may approve the institution's implementation of a program. You're going to delete that section. Is that correct?
Ms. Collier, will you please repeat that?
Did you say yes?
No, ma'am. Would you please repeat your question?
Sure. On page 4 of the committee of the bill that in front of us before you moved passage, page 4, lines 1 through 12, you're deleting that and replacing it with a different provision, correct? I'm looking at page 2 of your amendment.
Page 4, lines
1 through 12.
1 through 12.
And you're going to substitute with this part that says nothing in this section may be construed to limit or prohibit. So you're going to delete the other provision in page 4 that currently exists on lines 1 through 12, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so one of the items in here under your current, on the bill before us, says that the governing board may approve an institution's implementation of a program if the board determines that the program is necessary for the institution to comply with the terms of a grant awarded by our contract with the federal government, a private entity, or nonprofit organization. You are removing that. And so my concern is that there's not going to be coverage for our universities to comply with the terms of
Mrs.
a grant.
Kelly, I understand. We don't think it's necessary. We've applied for grants in the past. This bill maintains requirements already enshrined in federal law, so whatever information universities collect would still be consistent with what the feds require.
Well, it's not only the feds, because in the original, it said nonprofits and private entity. They give grants too, so.
We would say that it's our understanding that they would, applying for those grants would be satisfactory with
A statement?
the statement. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Faculty
So-
research is completely exempt from this bill, so grant funds are unaffected.
Well, it's not just research grants. There's different types of grants that are available to help improve or encourage a diverse population. So my concern here is that we are eliminating funding opportunities for our universities for those types of grants that may require more than a statement. I understand what you're saying is that your understanding is that most grants just require a statement, but how do we have evidence of compliance beyond a statement?
And again, I mean, we could just read the part of the amendment that says for the diversity statement, to apply for it, you know, we can, in our diversity statement, we can say that the institutions work on supporting first generation, low-income students, underserved student populations, and certifies compliance with state and federal anti-discrimination laws.
So if there's an audit, which I don't have a problem with the audit part, because you're saying that there should be an audit. If the audit reveals that there is no compliance, how do we...
We're just not aware of any grants that...
I know you're not aware, but there's some that exist that may require actual compliance. So what use is it for them to apply if they can't comply?
We're just not aware of any of those that address your question.
That's why we need to be concerned, because if you're not aware, there may be some that exist, and we may be limiting opportunities for our universities to apply for funding that may rely on certain programs or representations to show evidence of compliance. So I understand you're saying that they just want a statement that says, we agree to promote or look out for, encourage first-generation college students. Yes, that's a statement, but what do you do to show that they are complying with that statement? Is there anything in
I
this...
just don't have an example, and we think what we've put in the amendment is satisfactory to apply for those grants and ultimately receive them.
Well, you can apply for them, but it doesn't mean that you're complying. Then you have somebody who's not in compliance because they don't have evidence that they've complied beyond a statement. And so this is where I'm concerned that there may be a clawback and our universities have to turn dollars in because they can't prove that they've complied. So I want to know if there's been a contemplation to add to your amendment that they have to comply. If they are awarded a grant, they should be able to comply with the terms of that grant. That's what I'm asking. If that's something, because it was in your original bill. In this one, it was there. There was protections in place. Now they've been removed.
And in conversations with stakeholders and others involved, we do believe that with the language in the amendment, we will be able to satisfy applying to and receiving those grants.
You'll be able to satisfy compliance with the statement?
Applying and complying with state and federal anti-discrimination laws.
Okay, so then is it your position that if a private entity or nonprofit has certain requirements in it that deals with increasing diversity at the university through certain programs, that they should not apply for those because it's not aligned with...
Yeah, we love diversity. We don't have a problem with diversity.
I understand that. I understand. Thank you. But in terms of applying for a private entity grant or a nonprofit organization's grant that may require more than a statement to ensure that the goals of that grant are being...
We just hadn't seen any testimony, anybody suggest that we may not be eligible for those grants.
How would they comply with those? Because it seems like you've eliminated them. No, they're no longer a focus.
I would say that we are not eliminating them.
Well, they're not specifically mentioned in this new amendment that you have. You only say state and federal anti-discrimination laws. You don't say the terms of a grant from a nonprofit or a private entity. So if those grants that help cover gaps in funding that our universities have, if those grants have certain conditions and terms that relate to increasing diversity or increasing population for certain students, are you saying that those universities just shouldn't apply for them because they're not going to be able to show compliance?
No, ma'am. We still believe that with the language in this amendment, will still apply to be able to apply for those grants.
Yes, I understand about applying for them, but it doesn't do them any good if they apply and they can't comply because they don't have anything other than a statement. If I just have a statement that says we support diversity, but I don't show them how I support diversity, then I'm not in compliance.
I think you can show compliance through state law and federal law.
Okay, so help me understand what state law would show compliance.
Number one, first, the anti-discrimination law.
Anti-discrimination laws which protect whom?
Those discriminated against.
Gentleman's time's expired. Members, we are waiting on an amendment to the amendment. Ms. Collier, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, I raise a point of order against further consideration of this amendment under Rule 11, Section 6E of the House Rules on the grounds that the amendment takes the form of a complete or substantial substitute and was untimely filed.
Please bring your point of order down front. The following announcement, the clerk read the announcement.
The meeting of the Committee on Land and Resource Management scheduled for final recess is canceled.
The chair recognizes Mr. Burns for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House grant permission for the Committee on Land and Resource Management to meet while the House is in session today at 6 p.m. in room 1W.14 Agriculture Museum to consider pending, referred, and committee business.
Members have the motion. Objections, chair has done so. Following announcement, clerk read the announcement.
The Committee on Land and Resource Management will meet today at 6 p.m. in room 1W14 Agricultural Museum in a formal meeting to consider pending, referred, and committee business.
Members, to clarify, the point of order has been withdrawn. The following amendment,
Speaker,
Ms. Weiner, for what purpose?
I raise a point of order against further consideration of this amendment under Article 8, Section, I'm calling it on the amendment, Article 8, Section 6 of the Texas Constitution.
Please bring your point of order down front. The point of order has been withdrawn.
Mr. Speaker,
Ms. Niava Criado, for what purpose?
I raise a point of order against further consideration of this amendment under Rule 11, Section 2, that the amendment is not germane to the bill before us because it is.
Please bring your point of order down front.
Point of order is withdrawn. Following amendment to the amendment, the clerk will read the amendment to the amendment.
Amendment by Collier.
Chair recognizes Representative Collier to explain the amendment to the amendment.
Mr. Speaker, this amendment aims to redefine the purpose of DEI offices and clarify what they should and should not do. Throughout this process, it has become evident that there's been a misunderstanding about the role of these offices. They are not meant to provide preferential treatment or label individuals as racist or sexist. It's time we set the record straight and establish the true functions of a DEI office. So what does a properly functioning DEI office do? Well, first and foremost, it promotes academic freedom and intellectual inquiry by embracing diverse perspectives. I just want to make sure I don't get any feedback. I keep hearing everybody back here, so give me some. Okay. It recognizes that a meaningful discussion should include all voices and ideas, regardless of social, political, religious, or any other background. This is about inclusion, not exclusion. We want to ensure that everyone's viewpoint is respected and heard. Now let's address what this amendment prohibits. We are in agreement with the committee substitute that preferential, adverse, or different treatment based solely or significantly on an individual's race, sex, color, ethnicity, national origin, or other factors should not be allowed. We want to eliminate any form of discrimination from these offices and ensure fairness in hiring, employment, and admission decisions. But let's not overlook the vital role of DEI offices and what they play in supporting students, faculty, and administration members in confidential and informed ways. These offices provide a safe space for individuals with disabilities, veterans, first-generation college students, parents, and those from rural communities, among others, to seek assistance and guidance. Without these supports, our state's workforce will lose out on the valuable contributions of these individuals. Moreover, we must recognize the opportunity DEI offices have to foster constructive conversations among students from different perspectives. Instead of focusing solely on divisions, let's empower these offices to work towards unity. They can facilitate dialogue and understanding, helping us find common ground and build a stronger, more cohesive society. So in conclusion, this amendment is about setting clear parameters for DEI offices and prohibiting any form of discrimination. It ensures that these offices embrace diversity and promote academic freedom. It recognizes their crucial role in supporting individuals from various backgrounds and encourages them to foster constructive conversations that bring us together. Let's take this opportunity to redefine the purpose of DEI offices, promote inclusivity, and strengthen our state's commitment to equality. Together, we can create a future where everyone's voice is heard, respected, and valued. Members, I urge you to support this amendment. And I move adoption.
Chair recognizes Representative Kemple to speak in opposition to the amendment.
Respectfully opposed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Collier to close.
Well, this is the story of our life, where we don't get meaningful reasoning as to why we are being rejected or opposed. We need to know why this type of provision, which will promote inclusivity and it will help ensure that everyone's voices is heard. Why is that a problem? We're not hearing that. We just continue to hear you lose, we win, without having meaningful discussions and how this will truly impact our universities and those students in our future generation. Without these offices that promote and foster these conversations and help show the diverse strengths of Texas, we stand to lose. So I ask that you support this amendment that would ensure that our universities reflect the diverse and rich nature of our state.
Question occurs on the Collier Amendment. It's a record vote. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Representative Kippel voting no, Representative Schaefer voting no, Representative Collier voting aye. So Representative Morales-Shaw voting aye. Have all voted? It means 60 ayes and 82 nays. The amendment fails to be adopted. Mr. Schaefer? Does anyone else wish to speak on for or against the Kemple Amendment? If not, Chair recognizes Representative Collier to speak against the amendment.
Mr. Speaker, members, I have grave concerns about the impact this amendment will have on the funding for our universities. Many of our universities rely on Title III, Title V, and Title VI funding grants. This provision, this amendment, removes those protections that were in the original bill that would allow our universities to comply with any of the terms and conditions of those types of grants. As you know, many of our universities, they don't get 100% funding from the state, not even from the federal government. So there are gaps and needs that our universities have to meet the requirements to provide a quality education. So they look to nonprofits, they look to private corporations, they even look for other grants to help cover those gaps. But that money has conditions. And so in order to comply with those conditions, you have to show evidence that you're complying. And it may be more than just a statement. You heard the author of the amendment state that they're not aware of a grant that requires more than a statement. That doesn't mean that that doesn't exist. There are grants out there that require more than a statement when it comes to showing compliance. So these universities will be non-compliant with those grants or ineligible for those grants. So even though this amendment says that they can apply for grant funding, it does no good if I can't comply with the terms of that grant funding. And that has been removed. Now, if we go back to the original bill that was before us, there was a provision in there that would have covered this. That has since been removed. There is no protection for our universities. I am very concerned that some of our universities will close down because they don't have the appropriate and necessary funding to function. So we need to be very aware, and we're leaving them in the middle of the session, right at the end of the session, where we can't even provide help. So when this bill becomes effective, they will be left high and dry and without funding and opportunities. They may even have to eliminate or send back dollars because they are non-compliant as a result of this amendment. So we need to be aware of what we're about to do. We're not protecting our universities. We're not giving them the exception to comply or the ability to comply. In fact, we're eliminating that.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Rosenthal, for what purpose?
will the lady yield for questions?
Gentlelady yield for questions.
Yes.
She yields.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Collier. I actually
be disrupted in their operations. DEI offices go back as early as 1948 and are important tools to increase diversity on college campuses. With this amendment, this bill would only prohibit the establishment of new diversity, equity, and inclusion offices on a public university campus. So we would keep the offices that are existing currently under this amendment.
Chair recognizes Representative Kimpel to speak in opposition to the amendment.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to oppose this amendment because it changes the idea of what we're doing and closes all the offices. So respectfully opposed.
Chair recognizes Representative Morales to close.
Members, all this amendment seeks to do is to protect existing DEI offices. While I recognize the intention to prohibit the establishment of new DEI offices on our public university campuses, it is important to consider the impact on existing DEI offices that have already been put in place, along with the dedicated employees who work tirelessly to support the students. These DEI offices have a team of committed professionals who have built relationships, developed programs, and provided essential guidance to students from diverse backgrounds. It would be unjust to subject these employees to the risk of job loss due to the implementation of this legislation. Furthermore, let us reflect on the authority to dictate to colleges and universities that they are mistaken in establishing these DEI offices. We have not personally experienced the environments on these campuses, nor do we possess intimate knowledge of the motivations that led to the creation of these offices. How can we then legislate with such confidence as if we had walked in their shoes and possessed complete understanding? It is essential to recognize the autonomy and expertise of these institutions in determining the need for DEI offices. They have made these decisions based on their unique contexts, challenges, and aspirations for fostering inclusive learning environments. Disregarding their judgment and imposing our own beliefs would be an act of overreach. In light of these considerations, I respectfully urge you to vote yes on this amendment.
Question occurs on the adoption of the Morales-Harris amendment. It's a record vote. Clerk will ring the bell. So Representative Morales of Harris voting aye, Representative Kimpel voting nay. Have all voted? I mean, 61 ayes and 81 nays. Amendment fails to be adopted. Following amendment, clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Bernal.
Chair recognizes Representative Bernal to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is actually a very simple amendment. So much of what we've been talking about today has to do with allowing students to stand on their own, that we want to focus on the merit of an individual student and not allow their background somehow to influence the way that they're treated by a university or a college. And so that's what this amendment does in terms of admissions. What it says is that no